The sun hung low over the prairie, a merciless copper disk burning across the empty Wyoming sky. Margaret Sawyer stumbled through the cracked earth, her boots sinking into dust that clung to everything, her patched dress, her cracked lips, even her little boy's face. She clutched Thomas tight against her chest, feeling his ribs through the thin fabric of his shirt. He was too quiet, too still. The boy had stopped crying hours ago, and now his shallow breaths frightened her more than any scream could. It had been 3 days since they'd eaten anything more than a few bitter roots she'd dug from a dry creek bed. 3 days since the last homestead had turned them away. A widow, they'd said, brought bad luck. A widow with a child brought worse. Margaret had heard those words whispered from doorways and over fences, felt them like stones thrown at her back. Her husband was dead from a mining accident. She had no family, no skills beyond keeping house. What good was she to anyone? The boy's head grew heavier against her shoulder, but she shifted him higher, pressing her cheek to his fevered forehead. "Hold on, baby," she whispered, her voice cracked from thirst. "Mama's gonna find us help." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. The settlements were far apart out here, and every door she'd knocked on had closed in her face. Then, far off through the heat shimmer, she saw a cabin, a dark smudge against the endless brown grass. Smoke curled from its chimney. Someone lived there. Her heart thudded painfully, torn between hope and dread. How many more rejections could she take before she broke completely? Still, her feet moved, carrying her closer. By the time she reached the fence line, her legs trembled. "Hello?" she called, voice weak and hoarse. No answer. "Please, anyone." Silence. Then movement. A man stepped from the barn, broad-shouldered and quiet. He carried a saddle and set it on the fence like it weighed nothing. His hat shadowed his face, but she saw the firm line of his jaw and the calm way he stood, watching her. Her knees gave way, and she sank into the dust, clutching Thomas. Pride fell away with her tears. "Please, sir," she begged. "I'll work. I'll cook, clean, tend your animals. I don't need wages, just food for my boy. He's dying and I can't." Her voice broke. "I'll be your servant, your slave if you want, just don't let him die." For a long time, the man said nothing. The only sound was the wind moving through the dry grass. He stood still, unreadable. Margaret bowed her head. Certain she'd failed again. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey. Then a voice, deep, rough, unused, cut through the silence. "Stay there." Her head snapped up. The man had moved closer, his eyes steady on hers. "Come on, then," he said, turning toward the cabin. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. "You want shelter or not?" His voice was blunt. "Can't very well work if you pass out in my yard." Margaret staggered to her feet, clutching Thomas as she followed him. He opened the door, but didn't help her. The cabin was small and clean. One room with a curtained alcove, a stone fireplace, a rough table, and 2 chairs. The air smelled faintly of coffee and smoke. "Set the boy there," he said, nodding toward a pile of blankets near the hearth. "I'll heat some water." Margaret obeyed, laying Thomas gently on the blankets. His skin burned under her palm, his breath shallow. "What's wrong with him?" the man asked, filling a pot from a bucket. "Fever," she whispered, "and hunger. He hasn't eaten in days." "When did you last eat?" She hesitated. 3, maybe 4 days ago. He grunted, rummaging through a cupboard. "Can't help the boy if you collapse. Sit." She started to protest, but the authority in his voice made her obey. He set a cup of water in front of her. "Drink." Slow. The water tasted metallic, but to her it was heaven. She sipped carefully, watching as the man, Ethan Brooks, though she didn't yet know his name, knelt beside Thomas with a damp cloth. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he wiped the child's face. When the water on the stove warmed, he mixed something into it, herbs, and brought it over in a cup. "Help me sit him up. He needs to drink this." Together they propped Thomas up. Margaret supported him while Ethan coaxed small sips past his cracked lips. When they finished, the boy sighed and fell back asleep. "You need food," Ethan said. "Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you upright." Margaret looked at him, confused. "Sir, what do you want from me? My offer?" He cut her off. "We'll discuss that later. Name's Ethan, and I want you to eat before you fall over." He ladled stew from a pot and placed it before her. The smell made her stomach twist painfully. She hesitated. "I meant what I said. I'll work for you. I heard you," he said, sitting down with his own cup of coffee. "Didn't say I accepted." "Then why?" He took a sip before answering. "Your boy's sick. You're half dead. Wouldn't sit right, turning you out." She blinked, the simple kindness almost too much to bear. "I don't understand." "Don't need to," he said. "Just eat." Quote. Margaret obeyed, each bite of stew bringing tears to her eyes. It was simple food, rabbit and vegetables, but it was warm, real, and given without judgment. Ethan said little, his gaze fixed on the fire. When she finally set the spoon down, he spoke again, still not looking at her. "You can stay the night. Tomorrow, we'll see what comes next." Margaret stared into the firelight, dancing across the rough cabin walls. For the first time in months, she felt something close to safety. Her son breathed steadily beside her. The man across the table didn't look at her like she was a burden. Outside, the prairie wind howled around the cabin, but inside, it was quiet, the quiet of a place that endured. And as Margaret drifted toward sleep, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would bring more than survival. Morning light filtered through the cabin window, soft and golden. Margaret stirred awake, startled for a moment, until she remembered where she was. Not on the road, not begging for help, but safe, for now, inside Ethan Brooks's cabin. Thomas lay beside her on the pile of blankets, his breathing steadier, his fever cooling. Relief nearly buckled her as she pressed a kiss to his forehead. The cabin was quiet. Through the window, she saw Ethan outside by the corral, moving among the horses with calm, measured ease. He didn't rush or shout, just worked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Margaret's throat tightened. This was what safety looked like, something she'd almost forgotten existed. When Ethan came back inside, the scent of hay and morning air followed him. "You should be resting," he said, taking off his hat. "I've rested enough. I need to work." She gripped the broom she'd found, standing as straight as her tired body would allow. "Please, I can't just sit here doing nothing." He studied her silently for a moment. "Sit." She hesitated. "Sit," he repeated, calm but firm. Margaret obeyed, sinking into a chair. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze steady. "Your boy going to make it?" he asked. "I think so," she said softly. "The fever's down. He's strong." "Good." He nodded once. Then, after a pause, "About what you said yesterday, about being a servant." Margaret's back straightened. "I meant it. Every word. I'll work for my keep. Cook, clean, tend the horses, whatever you need. I'm strong when I've eaten. Not looking for a servant." She blinked. "Then why did you let us stay?" Quote, "Boy was sick. You were about done in. Didn't seem Christian to turn you out." "But I can't accept charity," she insisted, desperation leaking back into her voice. "People already talk about widows taking advantage. I won't be that. I'll earn my place." Ethan sighed quietly. "Who said anything about charity?" "I don't understand." He moved to the window, watching the horses outside. "Could use help around here. Garden's gone wild. House needs care. But I'm not looking to own anyone. You work because you want to, not because you have to. You want to leave when the boy's well, you can. No papers, no servitude." "Why would you do that?" she asked, truly baffled. He turned, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Place gets quiet," he said simply. "Would mind some noise for a change." She didn't know what to say. The simple truth of it disarmed her more than any kindness could have. Thomas stirred then, a small whimper escaping his lips. Margaret was by his side instantly. "Mama," he murmured, eyes fluttering open. "I'm here, sweetheart." Her voice trembled with relief. "You're safe now." Ethan brought over the broth he'd kept from the night before. "Try him on this." Slow. Thomas managed a few sips, then leaned against his mother, tired but awake. "He's a strong one," Ethan said. "He gets that from his father." Ethan nodded, something unreadable flickering across his face. Maybe from his mother, too. That afternoon, Margaret began her work. She cleaned the cabin, swept the floor, and washed the few dishes in the basin. Ethan didn't stop her this time, just worked alongside her in silence. When the chores were done, he handed her a faded dress and apron from a peg near the door. "They've been hanging there a while," he said. "Might fit better than what you've got." Margaret's throat tightened. The clothes clearly belonged to someone who wasn't there anymore. She didn't ask. She only nodded and thanked him quietly. Later, when Thomas had drifted back to sleep, she changed into the clean dress. It hung loose on her frame, but it was soft and smelled faintly of soap. For the first time in months, she felt human again. Outside, the sun climbed high. Ethan was at the corral when she joined him. "You know anything about horses?" he asked, without looking up. "Some," she said. "My father kept a few before I married." He nodded. "Good enough." "This mare's picked up a stone. Hold her leg while I check." She knelt beside the horse, careful and calm. Ethan guided her hands, his touch steady and sure. Together they worked in silence until the stone was gone and the mare snorted in relief. "Not bad," Ethan said, almost smiling. "Got 6 more need looking at." Margaret gave a small laugh. "Then I'd better get started." They worked side by side through the morning. By midday, her arms ached and her back throbbed, but the feeling was good. The ache of honest work, of belonging somewhere again. When they finally stopped for lunch, Thomas sat up on his own, color back in his cheeks. "Mama, where are we?" he asked sleepily. "We're staying with Mr. Brooks for a while," she said, smoothing his hair. "He's helping us." Thomas turned to Ethan. "Are you a cowboy?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Something like that. When I'm not sick anymore, I want to be a cowboy too." "Then you'll have to eat plenty," Ethan said. "Cowboys need strength." Thomas grinned, and Margaret felt tears sting her eyes. That night, after putting Thomas to bed, she stepped outside to breathe in the cool prairie air. Ethan was on the porch, sharpening a knife under the pale moonlight. "You've done good work today," he said quietly, without looking up. "So have you." "Just doing what needs doing." Margaret hesitated, then said, "Thank you for taking us in." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing." Quote, "The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, steady, like the land itself. The moon hung bright above the plains, casting silver light over the cabin, the horses, and the quiet bond forming between two people who'd both lost too much, and maybe, just maybe, had found something worth holding on to again. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of ranch life began to stitch itself into Margaret's soul. Every sunrise brought chores. Every evening brought the comfort of routine, simple, steady, safe. Thomas grew stronger by the day, following Ethan around like a shadow, peppering him with endless questions about horses, fences, and the stars. Ethan, patient as ever, answered them all in his slow, gravel-deep voice. Margaret watched the two of them with a heart both full and afraid. She'd seen kindness before, fleeting and false. But Ethan's wasn't like that. His kindness was built of silence, small gestures, a bucket of clean water waiting by the door, a repaired latch on the lean-to, bread left cooling on the table. It made her feel seen again, like a woman, not a burden. But peace, she'd learned, never lasted long on the frontier. It was late afternoon when she heard the riders, 3 of them. The heavy, confident rhythm of men who believed every place they went belonged to them. Dust rose behind their horses like smoke. Ethan stepped out from the barn, rifle resting easy in his hands, his posture calm but alert. The lead rider, a well-dressed man with silver streaking his beard, smiled when he saw Ethan. "Brooks. Good to see you still scratching out a living on this piece of dirt." "Garrison," Ethan said flatly. "You're trespassing." Garrison ignored him, his gaze sliding to Margaret, who'd frozen near the porch. "Well now," he drawled, "didn't know you'd taken on new help. Or maybe more than help." Margaret's face burned, but she said nothing. "She works here," Ethan said, his voice sharp as a blade. "That's all." Garrison smirked. If you say so. I came to make another offer. I'll buy this place generous terms. You can walk away with money in your pocket and no worries in the world. Quote, "Not interested," Ethan replied. "Don't be foolish. Accidents happen out here. Wells go dry. Livestock disappears. Be a shame for something like that to happen to you or to the lady." Ethan took a step forward, his tone low and cold. "Get off my land." For a moment, no one moved. Then Garrison chuckled, tipped his hat toward Margaret, and said, "Pleasure meeting you, ma'am. I expect we'll talk again." Then he rode off, his men following in a swirl of dust. When the sound of hooves faded, Margaret turned to Ethan. "He's dangerous," she said quietly. "I know. Then what do we do?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "We prepare." That night, after Thomas was asleep, Ethan taught her to shoot. Out behind the barn, under a blanket of stars, he stood close behind her, guiding her arms. "Breathe in. Let it out slow," he murmured. "Don't yank the trigger. Squeeze." The first shot missed. The second grazed the target. By the fifth, she hit dead center. "Better," he said with a ghost of a smile. She lowered the rifle, her shoulder aching but her spirit steady. "I hope I never have to use it." "So do I," Ethan said, "but if it comes to it, you protect what's yours." No hesitation. His hand brushed hers as he took the rifle back. The touch sent something through her she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, of partnership. But before she could speak, Thomas's small voice carried from the porch. "Mama, Mr. Ethan, can I watch?" Ethan chuckled. "Not yet, partner. You'll learn when you're older." The next few days passed in uneasy calm. The garden began to bloom again. Thomas laughed more. And Margaret allowed herself to dream. Just a little. That maybe they could build a life here, the three of them. Then, one evening as the sun dipped behind the hills, gunfire shattered the peace. Ethan burst through the door, rifle already in hand. "Get Thomas," he barked. Margaret didn't hesitate. She grabbed her son, shoving him under the bed as bullets shattered the window. Smoke curled through the air. They'd set the lean-to on fire. "Mama," Thomas cried. "Hush, baby," she whispered, forcing calm into her voice. "We'll be all right." Quote, "Through the window, she saw dark shapes closing in, a dozen men, maybe more, Garrison's hired killers. Ethan returned fire from behind the doorframe, calm and precise. 2 men fell. The rest kept coming. The cabin door shuddered under a heavy blow. Margaret snatched the second rifle, her hands steady from practice. When a shadow appeared in the window, she fired. The man dropped. Her stomach turned, but she didn't stop. Smoke filled the room. Fire crackled outside. "They're burning us out," she shouted. "Not if I can help it." Ethan kicked open the back door, firing into the dark. Then she saw him stagger. "Hit! Ethan!" she screamed. "I'm fine!" he grunted, reloading. "Get Thomas to the cellar!" She ran, dragging her boy toward the back. "Go, Thomas! Hide like we practiced. Don't come out till I say." He hesitated, tears in his eyes. "Mama! Now!" He ran. Margaret turned back just as the front door splintered open. Garrison's men poured through, guns blazing. She ducked behind the table, fired once, twice. The recoil bruised her shoulder, but she hit her mark. Then, suddenly, silence. A moment later, a rider thundered into the yard. Ethan, bloodied but alive, rifle blazing. He came like a storm, scattering the attackers. Margaret used the chaos to reload, firing from the doorway until her rifle clicked empty. When the smoke cleared, the surviving men were fleeing into the distance, Garrison among them. Margaret swayed, exhaustion and pain flooding her as the adrenaline faded. She looked down, blood on her side. The world tilted. Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. "Margaret!" "I'm fine," she gasped. "Thomas, he's safe." He pressed his hand against her wound, eyes fierce. "Stay with me, we're not done yet." They made it through the night, patching each other's wounds in a cabin half ruined by gunfire and smoke. When dawn came, so did resolve. Garrison hadn't won. He never would. By afternoon, ranchers from the nearby valley arrived. Men who'd heard the shots. Men tired of Garrison's bullying. Ethan stood before them, Margaret beside him, pale but unbroken. "It ends now," Ethan said. "We face him together." Quote. That evening they rode into town, a small army of ranchers and one determined woman. Garrison tried to bluff, but when Ethan slammed the deed to the ranch on the saloon table and the men surrounded him, his bravado cracked. "You'll take triple your last offer," Ethan said coldly. "Cash. Then you leave this valley for good." Garrison blustered, threatened, but when the others backed Ethan, he knew he was beaten. By sunset, he was gone. When they rode home, Thomas slept in Margaret's arms, his head against her shoulder. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Ethan stopped by the cabin, pulling something small from his pocket. A simple gold ring, worn smooth with time. "It was Mary's," he said softly. "I thought I'd never give it to anyone else, but she'd have wanted me to. She'd have liked you, Margaret." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan." He took her hand, his voice low but certain. "You and Thomas saved this place, saved me. I don't have much to offer, just this land, this life, and everything I am. Stay, be my wife." Margaret's breath hitched. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his rough hands trembling slightly. Thomas stirred, blinking sleepily. "Mama, are we home?" Quote. Margaret smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we're home." Ethan put an arm around her, holding them both close as the sun set over the prairie. Once, she had been a desperate widow begging for mercy. Now, she was a wife, a mother, and a woman who had fought for her home. And won. The wind carried the scent of rain, of promise, and of a new beginning on the Wyoming plains. Love had found them, and this time it was here to stay.